Salutations everyone, this is Razor bringing you guys another Overwatch 2 video here today talking about the tank role again. I play 3 different tanks in this game. Two of the big hot stars, Wrecking Ball and Ramatra. Not playing the other top tier matchmaking solo queue tank in Reinhardt. But I play a little bit of Winston, who is, you know, the Overwatch League tank of choice for the most part. Of course, we've seen a few tanks here and again in Overwatch League, but definitely mostly Winston. And he's a fun character I like to play. And I mentioned before that whenever I'm playing tank in Overwatch 2, I'm like constantly switching, whether it's, you know, the attack and the defense. Sometimes I'll be switching that because a dive tank's not always going to be the greatest option on defense without communication and practice on what a team wants to do. And so I won't be playing Wrecking Ball on the defense. I'll be playing Ramatra and then switching to Winston when I feel like that is what I needed to do. And the tank role is definitely the one that can... they live on a knife's edge, right? The balance of the tanks is so crucial to the game because there's only one of them, and so much of the game's power is put into them. When it comes to the team fight, the tank is the most important. They have the biggest HP pool, they have some of the biggest ultimates, and have a lot of the CC and a huge amount of the power, right? And when it comes to sustain, there is not much better than Wrecking Ball with his adaptive shields. Antied, lasered, doesn't matter, still living. Didn't really get a kill, but, you know, creating some space, allowing my Hanzo to get picks on both of their DPS. And we're getting cart movement, which is kind of the name of the game, right? That is the most important thing. Creating space, allowing your teammates to do things. And finding the Zarya on the stairs, I'm just gonna trap her. I don't care that she's got full charge. I got, you know, pretty much full health, and I still have my shields to pop, and probably some support coming my way, and we go ahead and take her out. That's one of the great things about Wrecking Ball. In Dive as a principle, but I think Wrecking Ball especially, is without communication and coordination, people are going to have a hard time dealing with Wrecking Ball because he's just going to have a lot of health, and he's going to live in a lot of fights. He's not going to have as big of an uptime as Ramatra does, and I'll talk about that when we switch to the defense here, and I switch to Ramatra. But Wrecking Ball, he's going to go in there and just kind of be unkillable when played properly. Now, he's, you know, a bit overrated in that sense, I feel like, because maybe you only die once or twice as Wrecking Ball, but you can still lose that game because even though you didn't really die, you weren't always in the fight. Because he can go in and be super duper tanky, but eventually he's going to have to reload, and he's going to be low on health, and he's going to have to go out, get healed by their supports or a health pack. And I see the Zarya aggressing here with pop adaptive shields, get a bit of health, and I just get ahead of them and just drop my minefield because they are separated. They can't retreat unless they go into the mines, and guess what? They tried to retreat and then went right into the mines. And I took out the Bastion as well. And then in here tried to take out and stagger the Ana, but she wasn't having it. She played it right. She played from a safe distance. I don't think had LOS on her tank at that point, but hey, they popped Grav, so maybe they didn't think that they needed all that help. And in the hubris, they all fell. And Wrecking Ball is great at taking advantage of that. Not a lot of people know how to play Wrecking Ball because he was kind of a unique mobile off-tank, main-tank hybrid in Overwatch 1, and definitely not like any of the other tanks, even like the other dive tanks, right? And people didn't really play the main dive tank Winston a lot in Overwatch 1 at the lower levels. So not a lot of people felt a kinship or a quick translation into Wrecking Ball, and Wrecking Ball was garbage for the first couple seasons of Overwatch 2, so not a lot of people know how to play as Wrecking Ball, and therefore not a lot of people know how to play against Wrecking Ball. So those things that are good against him just aren't played very much, and I think that's one of the reasons why Brigitte is, while she's still a good character and has a good kit, she's just not playable because all the things she's good at, people don't play. People don't play Winston. People don't play Diva. People don't play Wrecking Ball. At least, you know, in the the metal ranks that I play, those are just tanks that you don't see very often. We've seen a resurgence, obviously, in Wrecking Ball since the latest patch, but you really don't see much D.Va, especially much successful D.Va, and you never see Winston. I try to play him as much as I can when he makes sense, but sometimes he's just not going to make sense nearly as much as a Wrecking Ball, for instance, because Wrecking Ball has the sustain to be in a dive engagement for a bit more, to where he doesn't need to have the heals, and if you fireball damage somebody and then get the boop the slam damage and then the follow-up, that's a little bit easier in a more wide open spot, whereas Winston might be a little bit more vulnerable to being CC'd or being discorded or not having enough damage to follow up, especially if they have something like a Mercy. If something's getting healed by Mercy, they like legit can't die to Winston. It's just the math doesn't work. So sometimes Winston is going to be the better pick. Like, for instance, Dorado Attack. Dorado Attack, while Wrecking Ball would be fine, and I loved playing him in Overwatch 1 because while my other tank was on the payload, drawing all the aggro, I would go on the left stairs, get behind them, and then boop them all off with the fireball, and then we just kill them because they lost high ground and they just all took a bunch of damage, and we can capitalize, and they lose the only tool that was at their disposal, and we also are going to have respawn if we lose anybody within that engagement. We're probably going to, at the very least, trade, and with the closer respawn, win that fight, or at least have a very, very good chance at doing so. And in Overwatch 2, where they only have one tank, people are going to be looking for you, and you not being in the fight is going to leave some of your teammates that need babysitting vulnerable. And when it comes to playing Wrecking Ball, having a teammate that needs to be babysat or slower DPS that aren't playing with you, you might have to switch that up, whether it is your composition from your point of view. That's one of the different interesting things about tank. You could be playing your tank perfectly and very well, good matchup against the enemy team and good for the map, and you still have to switch because your team is just not playing well with it. And sometimes it's just your responsibility to make that change. I didn't think I needed to because I thought my DPS were doing a good job at taking advantage of the openings that I was giving them, and my support were doing a good enough job to keep my DPS up, and I certainly wasn't dying with the proper use of my adaptive shields and the heals that I was getting from my supports, to where I felt like this dive comp against the Zarya was the right call, and it worked out fairly well, isolating a single target with a big body like Wrecking Ball, killing their Mercy a couple of times. She was a easy dive target here, and sometimes their DPS are going to be as well. And on the defense here, I'm going to be playing Ramatra, the other hot topic tank, because he came into the game and he was pretty good. He was pretty good and unique, which is fun from the tank perspective because we're so used to having to play the same way so much of the time that having a character like Ramatra is fun and interesting because he's got the long range poke damage. He's not going to have fall off. He's going to, if something's standing still, you're catching a Widow ADSing at you or an Ana ADSing at their tank, you're putting a lot of damage into them via the headshots, and you're going to force them to reposition, force them to back up, force them to heal, or you're getting the kill. And that's great. I feel like his the Vortex is a super underrated part of his kit. Throw it at the door at the beginning of the game, like that's like 12 ult charge, like for free every time, because like they're just gonna walk out of it. They know they're not in danger immediately of dying, and they don't really care. So they're just gonna walk into it and give you free ult charge. And when placed correctly, that's just kind of almost like a free dive. It's not necessarily a dive because you're not a dive character, but they aren't moving and you are because of the tick damage that they're taking as well as the slow. So he's a fun character to play and really strong in that he can poke at long range and beat the shit out of you in close range. And while Wrecking Ball might be the hardest to kill in a singular engagement, Ramatra is going to be the hardest tank to kill within a fight because when used properly on his cooldowns, Sure, his shield isn't going to last long, but also it's probably not going to get broken because, as you can see, this is a fat 1,000 health shield. So you're going to be able to, while you have that shield up against a character that doesn't have a shield, like a Zarya, you're going to force them to bubble, or they're taking a lot of damage, or they are taking some damage. So you're immediately going to be at a bit of a up on them, and you slow them down, reverse the tables on them, throw it behind so they can't retreat without taking a ton of damage as you go into Nemesis form and punch the shit out of them. And at the end of the day, you have one of the best ultimates in the game and one of the fastest charging ults in the game too. It's ridiculous how fast Ramatra's ult charges for the power that it outputs. It is honestly super duper ridiculous. It can feel really bad going up against a Ramatra because he's just going to get that ult every single fight if the enemy team isn't like instantly dying every time. Otherwise, it's going to take him a little bit more because he's not going to put out as much damage in a shorter fight. But if they're getting the kills, then you don't even need to get your ultimate in order to get that value. So we're doing fairly well here. I mean, after losing A very quickly, that was definitely not a very good A defense. But maybe we could solidify the streets phase as the rest of my team is doing a pretty decent job at high ground. We have the Ashe, we have Baptiste. We have characters that can dominate the high ground, and their tank is not switching off. I showed that it didn't work against the Wrecking Ball, and for at least some of the part, I'm showing them that it's not working against the Ramatra. They get the nano on her, they get her at pretty good charge, and I'm still not dying, but then they pop the dragons, and our Zarya is able to run past the dragons, whereas I can't, so I mistakenly do pop my ult here, where I should have just stayed on the cart, and or just died, tried to brawl something out, maybe get a 1-for-1 trade. But they're going to get a little bit of momentum here to where I feel like I'm going to switch to Winston. Because if the Zarya comes at me with support, say a nano like she did right there, or just a lot of heals, she's going to get a lot of charge and can just walk right at me. And I really hate that. I really hate that when a Zarya can just walk at me and get huge value. So I decide, screw the Zarya. They have a Zenyatta, and I'm just going to jump at him, and he's going to die. They have a Zarya and a Zenyatta and a Lucio, so they don't have big burst healing to save anything that I'm going to be diving on. Sure, they will have the Discord Orb to kill me quicker, and or, give me a fair shake at, hey, you have a Discord Orb on you, you might want to back up. And sometimes I'm going to have to do that, not be as aggressive as I want, but I know I have the threat from the high ground with my Ashe, and I know even with the dive that this Cassidy is going to be diveable, and their support are going to be vulnerable because Zenyatta has no movement options and Lucio isn't going to be able to peel for him very well outside of booping me away. But they aren't, I don't feel like, coordinated enough to do that. And they do switch to the Reaper here, which is one of the sucky things about playing tank in this game, where it's like, oh, if they are doing this, I have an answer for that. They have doing this, I have an answer for that. Winston is just straight up 1-for-1 countered by Reaper. That does suck that a single DPS character can make that impact to just kind of wipe your ability to play Winston off the board. Whereas there's like no other tank where I think their value gets wiped out by one DPS character. Maybe they get a bad tank matchup. Like I hate it when I have a D.Va on my team against the Zarya and they're trying to defense matrix this laser. You cannot defense matrix the laser, lady. Like, that's not going to work out for you. But they make some mistakes here. They get desperate on trying to secure the second hold, and they lose the Grav, which was, I feel like, their biggest value against me. And now we have the Zenyatta to poke them out, and they are able to get this second point. But I just felt like they made themselves vulnerable, and Zarya isn't going to be great at peeling against them. All I really have to worry about is the Reaper. The Ashe could coach gun me away, which I don't believe that she does, but that's still not going to kill me. That's only going to prolong the inevitable of her death. And their Zarya she can't harass my team as much as I can harass them. She can slowly walk at them with a ton of DPS power and kill something, but it's going to take her a while to get there. By the time she gets there, look, I've already killed their Zenyatta. Well, I mean, our Ashe killed their Zenyatta with a little bit of my help. And their Ashe was vulnerable, gets the bubble, gets the healed. So, like, they had to invest in a lot of resources to not be down in the fight right there. But our Hanzo gets the headshot on the Ashe, and I clean up the Mercy. And not wanting to die and get myself staggered here, pop my Rage along with the Transcendence, which was definitely not necessary unless they felt like they were about to die. But we had the spawn advantage, honestly, to where it might have not been the best play to pop both of those ultimates. One would have done the job, either one. But and what are you going to do? That is going to happen. Your team are going to pop too many ults at the same time. And that's always a shame when, especially if it's like a high value thing that you didn't need to burn. But Zarya's going to be on cart? Fine. I'm going to dive on the Zen and just kill him, right? They aren't making the adjustments for me. I made the adjustments for them. I saw what they were vulnerable with, and I didn't need to switch to Wrecking Ball. But I stayed on Wrecking Ball because I felt like it was going to be a good play. They didn't make the adjustment, and I dominated. I died like, what, 1 or 2 times as Wrecking Ball? Had some off and on success with the Ram. But I felt like I needed to switch in order to take advantage of their weakness. Move to Winston, and we get the hold. We get the hold, and we get the win. And I go 52-8 on a tank as Bob just punches me to death. That was not something that I was expecting. But hey, they couldn't get to the cart due to the threats that we had on the board and the staggers that we had. In the advantages that our team comp gave us, we took advantage, and they did not make the necessary adjustments. And when it comes to being the tank player, that is the role that you are going to benefit the most of in making those necessary adjustments, because there's so many things that you're going to have to deal with in the tank role. And if you can find the right answers, you're going to have huge success like I did on this game, going 52-8 on 3 different tanks against a team that just too stubborn to switch. And most of the time, that's what you're going to get. A team that's too stubborn to switch. Don't be too stubborn. Switch up for what is needed and asked of you and what the enemy team is going to give you, and you will dominate. More so in the tank role than any other role.